show up. So you should get your prompt. So we're on the record now, I guess. Hang on just a sec here. What else do we have here? Jackie, greetings, and Chandini, greetings. I feel like in historical linguistics, a lot of what we do is sort of going back in time, right? In a certain way. And I feel like today was like going back in time because I woke up and thought that it was February. So with all the snow, it was really kind of bizarre, I thought, but I figured it was appropriate for historical linguistics for us to time travel, as it were. Yeah. Yeah, it was, and as oftentimes with historical, or with looking at innovations and judging them and so forth, there's sort of a sense of the innovation being a bit anomalous. Remember, I was talking yesterday about, or on Monday, about postpositions in the entering Greek from Turkish, and how that's sort of like a complexification, and somehow the anomaly of having green leaves on the trees covered with white snow, heavy white snow, was has sort of that same kind of feeling of being at odds with the norms. Anyway, this is the latest I can remember there being real snow. So what do we say? Oh yeah, so Chandini, you had the same feeling about time reversal or whatever. What do you say, Kenna? Our magnolia blossoms already died from the cold. Oh yeah, they would have died today. All right, so they were spared the ignominious outcome that today would have given them. All right. Okay, Jinyi, good to have you with us. I guess we are literally nipped in the bud, right? Not speaking metaphorically, right? Good. Okay, so, and Marcia is with us. Excellent. Okay, so we're getting up there. So first order of business in terms of announcements. How are we doing on SEIs today? The answer is only okay. The latest statistics say 7 out of 15 have responded. So this is my last chance to put in the equivalent or something akin to an in-person appeal to you. So if you haven't yet done your SEI, please mark the time in your calendar to do them before. I think they have to be done before Sunday night at 11:59, because once Monday rolls around on the calendar, the exam week is considered to have started, and they have to be done before the exam period starts. So if you haven't done them already, and I know that there are 8 of you who haven't, I don't know who, and I'm not supposed to know who, and I'm not going to try to figure out who, but those of you who have not yet done it, please make a time in your calendar. It takes all of 10 minutes or so to do it. And we'll see how far we get in our material today, and if there's the opportunity to stop early, I will, and give you the last few minutes to do your SEIs. Okay, so that's my what has become my daily plea to you, but please, I take them seriously, and I hope you take them seriously. That's about the best I can say about them. Okay, anyone have any questions about anything? Let's see, we're up to 12. We have Isabel and Claire with us. Greetings to you guys. All right, so I guess let's move on then to, I don't see any any puzzled looks or any hands up or anything of that sort. So let's move on to our the order of business for the day, which of course involves historical linguistics. I thought we would start with, not with my email, but we would start with, nope, that's the wrong class. We would start with, I think this is going to be a class. Yeah, here we go. Week by week. We will start with a just a quick revisiting of Lebov's model. I hope you had a chance to think about it more, maybe even look back at the article or at least review this this model that he proposed. This is a 5-step approach to understanding language change, and he developed it based on sound change, based on the example from Martha's Vineyard that you read about in the 1963 paper, but it actually applies to change in general. The starting point is synchronic variation, as he made very clear in the early pages of the paper that you read, and social evaluation. These are really the 2 key elements to what's going on with the change. We start with a sort of steady state, and then there's an innovation away from that steady state, away from the existing norm. And any of the kinds of factors that we've been talking about could be responsible for that innovation. The internal factors, physiology of the speech system, the analogy, or we could add here also, and probably I should add here, caused by internal factors. Or external being language contact. And you're wondering what happened to that. Me too. There we go. So that could be added to the there we go. Okay. And at that point, once an innovation enters the system, there's competition between the innovative form and the existing earlier form. There's variation, so there are 2 different forms, 2 different. He actually explains the notion of a linguistic variable as 2 different ways of saying the same thing. So if you're it's the idea of saying the same thing that really puts the innovative form and the earlier form in competition with one another. It's at that point where there's competition that a process which we don't completely understand yet, but the attribution of a social value to the forms. One of the things that he emerged out of his 1963 study was thinking about linguistic forms as markers of social identity. In the case of Martha's Vineyard, it was this positive orientation towards the island that was signaled by the innovative variants, the centralized vowels in these diphthongs, I and o, essentially. There we go. And when social value is attached to the forms, then they can be evaluated either positively or negatively. But once there's some value attached, then there's a basis for evaluating them. And what we find then is they're competing with one another. They have different values, even though there's 2 different ways of saying the same thing. They have different baggage, if you will, attached to them, and that allows for the resolution of competition in light of that evaluation. And at that point, we get then subsequent spread, which would be the adoption of the positively evaluated or the winner, as it were. Remember, Sturtevant talked about these as rivals. So the winner in the rivalry and the adoption of the winner and subsequent spread with other members of the speech community joining in and sort of siding with the winner, so to speak. at that point, we have the generalization of one variant at the expense of the other, and that leads to the establishment of a new norm, a new steady state where there's just one way of saying something. And at that point, we're sort of, you know, going like this and then back up to the top. So we go in this direction, we end up with a new steady state, and then we are, at that point, have a new norm, the existing norm, that we can then be attacked, if you will, by the various factors that can lead to a new innovation. Now, it's important to recognize that a couple of things about the nature of variation. First of all, it's not always the case that the innovative form wins out in the competition. It could be that speakers return to the earlier state of affairs, the earlier norm, and reject the innovative form. Think about the way the very first day in class, the way Kathleen Parker evaluated the use of no problem for you're welcome. And for her, the older variant was perfectly suited to what she needed it to do, and for her that was the solution. Now she ends up being, in a sense, outvoted by because no problem has taken over, and you can hear it quite a bit. In fact, there are other variants of that it competes with and maybe is losing out to. But as far as Kathleen Parker was concerned, it was the earlier form was the suitable winner, at least the one that would win in as far as her usage was concerned. But if and Labov emphasizes the sort of community aspect, if what we see here is a generalization across the speech community, that is more and more speakers jumping on the bandwagon, so to speak, then we have eventually Kathleen Parker would be in the minority, and there would be a new norm established with no problem as the preferred way of saying what used to be said by you're welcome. So and as I think I mentioned this at the end of class last time, that in these cases where the older form wins out, where the older form is restored, so to speak, then if you project back in time, and keeping in mind what we said early on about uniformitarianism and the fact that the processes that we can witness going on today, like in Martha's Vineyard in 1963 that Labov was witnessing, were available in the past and were active in the past, then we can look at, we can imagine that there would be all kinds of competitions over hundreds and hundreds of years that were resolved in favor of the already existing form and ousting the innovative form. And from our point of view, if we go from a situation with A taking on a variant B, so that they're in competition with one another, if that competition is resolved in favor of A, and we don't have any direct evidence of the period of competition, then as far as we're concerned, nothing has happened. If we're there could be any number of competitions between innovative forms and older forms in the past that were resolved in favor of the older form that don't look like that from our vantage point now, they don't look like they're like anything was happening at all. So, but if instead we have a situation where you have A giving rise to competition between A and B, and that competition is resolved in favor of B, then it looks, from our vantage point hundreds of years later, it looks like there has been a change. So that's an important point to keep in mind. It's also the case that not all variation leads to change. That is, not all variation leads to forms that get socially evaluated and adopted by other members of the speech community in such a way that it ousts the earlier form. That is to say, and this is a point Labov makes many times, there can be what we can refer to as stable variation. And he actually thinks that that's probably the more usual case with variation, that variants coexist. I mean, think of some contractions in English like can't instead of cannot, or won't instead of will not. These are variants that exist. They serve different sort of stylistic functions, and that's been a stable aspect of English auxiliary use with negatives for hundreds of years, actually. So so not all variation leads to change, but in Lebov's formulation, variation is essential to there being the possibility for change. And then finally, the distinction we made between innovation, we've tried to be careful in our terminology and talk about innovations. I've tried to be careful and talk about innovations, but we often talk about change sort of in a loose sense. But for Lebov, real change is a matter of an innovation that spreads. So the spread of an innovation, the existence of an innovation by itself is not a change. It's a change in maybe one person's usage, but not necessarily, or a small group of people's usage. But it's not a change overall. He emphasizes, as I've said, he emphasizes the community aspect to language development. So for him, a change, the real change, we could say, resides in not just the emergence of an innovation in the first place, but the spread of that innovation through to other members of the speech community. So these are the two key elements for Lebov. Okay, any questions about Lebov's approach? This was really revolutionary when it came. This is one of the most important articles in historical linguistics ever, I would venture to say, and certainly in the last 60 years or so. Okay, good. Well, then I'm going to move on to the other topic that I promised you for today, which was language diversity in Ohio, where we will start with, here we go. We will start with a consideration of all of this I have. Yeah, okay, good. So it has sometimes been said about the upper Midwest that there is not a lot of, which includes Ohio, that there's not a lot of linguistic diversity, but the Finnish linguist who's done work on Finnish in the Finnish language in Michigan said at one point, at the grassroots level, there's more linguistic diversity in the upper Midwest than meets the eye. And that diversity actually has two different dimensions. That's what I want to focus on today, the historical and prehistorical situation, and also then the present day situation. So we'll survey both of those. Prehistorically, and I'm going to focus just on Ohio, though some of what I say could be extended to other parts of the upper Midwest, including Michigan and Wisconsin, for instance. But I'm going to focus mainly on Ohio because, after all, this is the Ohio State University, and we are all Buckeyes in some sense. So prehistorically, Ohio was the home to several Indian tribes who spoke different languages, in some cases related languages. There was a group of Indians who have left a mark in Ohio, as you'll see, of unknown lineage. These are the Indians of the so-called Hopewell culture. They're called Hopewell because of a man named Hopewell, on whose farm some of these artifacts were to be found. It's not the name of a particular Indian tribe, and that's why the term Hopewell culture is important. They're identified by artifacts that point to particular trade routes that they engaged in around North America, and also monuments, especially earthworks. Another similar group of unknown lineage is referred to as the Adena culture. Now, it's important from the linguistic standpoint to realize that we know nothing about their languages. They're identified solely in terms of the physical monuments, the physical remains, the artifacts that we have found. I'm going to show you some pictures just to prove that they are really there. This is the National Hopewell Culture National Historical Park in outside of Chillicothe. And these are mounds. They're generally burial mounds. A few have been excavated. Some of them have been left alone. The tallest one is about maybe 15 feet high or so. They're not like gigantic pyramids or anything of that sort, but they're distinctive and distinct mounds. And they're also surrounded by these low earthwork walls. And in fact, what we find in Hopewell and also Adena culture is this evidence of their having been there in the form of these earthworks. They're really quite striking. Have any of you actually ever visited any of them around Ohio? I see at least Kyle has. Anyone else? They're really quite interesting, and they're worth I think worth a visit. And Chillicothe is just about an hour from Columbus, an hour south. One really amazing earthen work is the Serpent Mound, which is further south. I think it's about 2 hours or so from sort of south and I think a little bit southwest of Columbus, where you can see this sort of low earthenwork. I'm sorry, I just missed. I saw there was a question or comment. Your dream to go to the Great Serpent Mound. Well, and Hannah, you've been there, I gather. Yeah, it's really quite something. I encourage you to, you can especially to follow your dream, but I encourage all of you to go visit it. It's really quite remarkable. Let me show you this is a picture of it taken from above, and you can see why it's called a serpent mound, because it sort of looks like a snake, and it even seems to have a mouth at one end that is swallowing something. And there's of course a lot of speculation as to just what it signifies and what is it swallowing and why a serpent and so forth. But just taken on sort of on its own terms, it's just fascinating in and of itself, whatever its signification might have been. Here's an older picture of a black and white picture that you can see. Yeah, and refugees. Yes, okay. There are also, let me get back to my screen here. Can I move this at all? No, I guess not. It seems to be, oh, there we go. Yeah, I can get at it a little bit. This is just a smattering of photos of various Ohio earthworks. There are some up in Newark that you can get a glimpse of here, and they're laid out in ways that reflect a very careful geometry to them. It's referred to sometimes in the literature as sacred geometry, because it's assumed that there was some either religious or spiritual value associated with the organization of these things. But they're really quite interesting. They're circles and squares and careful measurements. You can see here on this one. This is a characteristic shape that we find with a square laid out and a circle at another end, and then connecting with these lines here representing earthwork, small earthwork fencing, basically, or wall sort of encompassing the area. The town of Circleville, which is further south than Chillicothe, was called anyone from Circleville or near it? It was called Circleville because it was encircled at one point by one of these earthwork walls that the Hopewell folks left behind. And Kyle has family there, so I think the earthworks are gone entirely, but there's still a sort of trace of it in the name of Circleville, and so named because of the um, wall, the low earthwork wall that had enclosed it. Let me go back to my materials here. So yeah, I encourage you to see it. I think it's just fascinating stuff. The Serpent Mound, the Newark earthworks in Circleville, this earthwork, and right here in Columbus, you don't have to go very far because there's one. This gives you this is Newark. This gives you an idea. You can play around with this ancient Ohio trail and watch a video of that sort of outlines the sacred geometry. That's involved here, but there is one right here in Columbus, the Shrum Indian Mound. It's off of Trayview Road, so it's maybe about 10 minutes from campus by car, and that's what it looks like right there. It's not. It's a little taller than the mounds down in Chillicothe, in my impression at least. And you can walk around it. You can climb and walk on top of it as well. And there it is, you little parking area. There's not a lot to see, but it's a remnant of the Adena culture, I believe, that we have still here in Columbus. Well worth seeing, just because it's an unusual. And it's named Shrum after the name of a man who owned the land that they gave to the Historical Society at some point, preserved as a memorial to those first Ohioans whose bones rest in this ancient tomb. Okay, so we'll look at a little bit more of this by and by, but okay, so that's the prehistoric situation with Indians in Ohio. There are also historical Indian tribes where we know the names of the Indians. We know something about their language. There are several Algonquian tribes in Ohio, Delaware, the Miami or Miami, the Ottawa and Shawnee, several Iroquoian tribes, the Erie, the Mingo, the Wyandot, and in fact, Iroquoian, probably Seneca, is the source of the name Ohio, which means great or good river in that language. Mostly these Indian tribes were driven out of Ohio. They were relegated to reservations now in Oklahoma and elsewhere. This is a very sorry part of American history. It's an unfortunate reality of the European colonization of North America. Recently, a Center of Miami Studies has been developed at Miami University under the direction of a guy named Derek Baldwin, who was a winner 2 years ago of one of the MacArthur Genius Awards for his work on reclaiming and revitalizing Miami language and culture. He is realistic about revitalizing the language, saying that we're not going to make hordes of speakers, native speakers of the language, but in his view, any Miami, any Miamia is better than no Miamia. And he's been quite successful in generating interest in the language among the members of the Miamia tribe. I think I have something to show you here. Yeah, so this is a map of the original peoples of Ohio in the historic period, post-contact, that is post-contact with Europeans, where you see the Erie, Wyandot, and Ottawa, and Mingo. Those are the Iroquoian tribes, and Delaware, Shawnee, and Miamia, the Algonquian tribes. I've mentioned some of these families to you in the past, but I can show you this is the distribution of Eastern Woodlands Indians. We have a question here in the chat. Yeah, the Trayview one. Yeah, Kyle, you've seen it then. The Trayview one seems so out of place next to modern apartments. Yes, there's been a lot of building over there, and I just hope that I think it's a protected spot now, but it is somewhat of an anomaly now with all the modern apartments. But it's good. It's good to have it represented in some way or another, I think. Good point. What we see here are the distribution of various so-called Eastern Woodlands Indians. That's just a cultural designation, not a linguistic or tribal designation. And you can see these are different tribes around the northern, the upper Midwest and the Northeast. The ones that are, I've underlined the ones that are relevant for Ohio, though they're not necessarily located on the map as far as Ohio is concerned, but Erie and Shawnee are there. Delaware associated more with the east coast, but there were Delaware Indians in Ohio, and the Miami were actually sort of right on what is now the border area between Indiana and Ohio. Some of these are a good many of these are Algonquian tribes, though some are Iroquois as well. The Iroquoian being mostly here, and the Algonquian being basically the rest that you see here. So Algonquian and Iroquoian, the two big Indian language families as far as the Northeast and Upper Midwest are concerned. The Algonquian languages I can give you. This is the extent of the. Did I miss another chat? No. This is the extent of the Algonquian language family. It ranges over most of Canada, as you can see, from Quebec across to Alberta, but also across the Northeast and into the beginnings of the Southeast and the Upper Midwest here as well, and some Plains Indians. I call this Algonquian proper because there are two very distantly related languages, Yurok and Wiyot, that are spoken in, or were spoken in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area of California. And they are said to form a large sort of super group known as Algic, which is the Algonquian languages here. These are the ones that are most relevant to our part of the world in Ohio, and together with Wiyot and Yurok. I think there are still some Yurok speakers, so there's, as with so many of these languages, they're in a very precarious state of having just a few fluent speakers, and the few that remain are elders, are quite old. So it's not, the prospect is not good, of course, for many of these languages. But Cheyenne, for instance, I was just reading about it today, has some 350 people who have learned it as their first language over the years, though a smaller percentage now, maybe under 100, are still consider themselves to be fluent speakers of the language and still use it. But they all tend to be older, 60 or above, and it's not being passed on to younger speakers. An unfortunate situation, to be sure. Iroquoian, in a similar situation. Here's the Iroquoian family. The ones that are relevant for us include Wyandotte and Seneca on this list. This is just a schematic, but it gives you an idea of the interrelationships among these languages. Go back to this now. There are also then European settlers coming into Ohio and into North America. Historically speaking, the German-speaking Mennonites and Amish were among the earliest, coming in the late 1700s, early 1800s, at least as far as Ohio is concerned. Somewhat later, there were a good many Central and Southern Europeans who immigrated to Ohio, especially Hungarians and Slavs, especially South Slavs. This would be around the mid 1800s. Among the South Slavic groups that came, there were a large number of Slovenes. Cleveland is the largest Slovene population center outside of Slovenia. Slovenia is this relatively small country in Central Europe, right at the edge of the Balkans. Remember, I mentioned it last time. And outside of Slovenia, Cleveland ranks as the largest Slovene population center. There were a number of a good many Serbs and Croatians, many of whom were involved in coal mining. So they were in the Ohio coal country, Youngstown, Akron, sort of the sort of eastern parts east of Cleveland. In the early to mid 1900s, a large number of Greeks arrived in Ohio, especially in Canton, in Akron, and Columbus. There's the just at the edge of the downtown, there's the Greek Orthodox Church that was founded here in Columbus in 1910, and I can show you. I think I have a picture of that. No, that's another picture of the Shrum Mound in remarkable Ohio. Here is the Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church. I don't know how many of you have ever been downtown. They didn't hold it last year, but to the Greek festival on Labor Day. Is anyone? Of course, it wouldn't have been held last year, but and I'm not sure what the plans are for this year. We'll see. So maybe you haven't been around Columbus long enough to, but this is during the festival. Crowds of the sort that you don't see these days, of course. But the church is a very it's a beautiful church. It was this part doesn't date to 1910. It was rebuilt in the I think in the late 1980s, if I remember correctly. We'll come back to that by and by. So the present day diversity in Ohio, especially focusing on the urban areas where there's greater concentrations of speakers. Like Cleveland has tremendous linguistic diversity. I think I'll just focus on Columbus though, because it's what I know best, and is probably maybe the most relevant to you. Though some of you may have experiences elsewhere in Ohio that you could share with us. So in terms of present day diversity, the German speakers, so-called Pennsylvania German speakers, they refer to their language as Deutsch. If you know anything about German, you might know that German is referred to as Deutsch, the language itself, and Deutsch is the Pennsylvania German version of Deutsch. We say Pennsylvania German even though it's in Ohio, because they first established settlements in Pennsylvania, and there's still large numbers of German speakers from this late 1700s, early 1800s era in Pennsylvania, but then others moved westward and settled in Ohio. Especially they're especially prevalent in Holmes County. I'll show you a map. I can just get to the right spot on my yeah, here's a map of Amish settlements in Ohio. Here's Columbus, and Holmes County is the largest settlement, and it's about 30 minutes or so by car from Columbus to Holmes County. I'll come back to talking about the Amish by and by, so there will be opportunity to say more about them. So that's in the general Columbus area, though not necessarily in Columbus itself. Within Columbus, we have still large numbers of Greek speakers, or some still use the language on a regular basis. So with almost all of these languages, there's sort of resisting or fighting against the onslaught of English and the social and economic and political pressures to speak or engage in the use of the dominant language, English, in the region. So I mentioned the Greeks already. That in the 1970s, due to the development of a Honda manufacturing plant in Marysville, which is in sort of northwest of Columbus, about 40 minutes or so from the outskirts of the Columbus area. The Honda plant was, even though it used a lot of local labor as the workers in the plant, the middle management were from did I forget to record this, or am I recording? I am recording it. Good. Okay. Thank you. Wouldn't want these pearly words to be lost. The middle management came from Japan, and many of those families settled in Dublin and a northwestern suburb of Columbus. So starting from the 1970s, there were significant numbers of Japanese speakers in at least in the Dublin area, leading to the development of an English as a second language program in the Dublin schools, for instance. In the early 1980s, from Southeast Asia, there were a number of refugees coming, especially Hmong. In the mid-1980s, South Asian, mainly from India, but also Pakistan, arrived in the area. And late 1980s, Ethiopian and Eritrean immigrants made it to Columbus. Starting from about the 1990s, there was beginning to be a significant Latino, Hispanic population, Spanish-speaking in Columbus, and Somalis coming in the early 2000s, especially. There are other groups more recently, significant numbers of Koreans and even Albanians. And one measure, and this is where I want to come back to the Greek Orthodox Church, one measure is the number of religious houses of worship. So there's a Serbian Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church I've shown you already. There's a Hindu temple in Powell, the Bharatiya Hindu temple. There's some Hindu artifacts, if you will, associated with rituals and such that you can see here. One, this is moving outside of the Columbus area, but one very prominent religious monument speaking to a matter of diversity and also not just religious diversity, but also linguistic diversity, is the Islamic Center of Western Ohio, up near Toledo, which you can see from the I-75 as you drive by. Here's a, no, I thought that would be a close-up of it. Guess not. There we go. No, oh, there. Okay, that's the inside. Outside, Islamic School, the Greater Toledo area. Inside, more inside. I see that there are some questions, comments. Claire has been there, yes. You're from Toledo. I remember the first time I drove, thinking as like as Hirvonen said, thinking of Ohio as being somewhat homogeneously uniform in terms of diversity. In my early days here, I remember driving up to Michigan and going through past on 75 in the direction of Toledo, and being struck by seeing the Islamic Center. It was very unexpected, and I've come to have a greater appreciation for diversity in Ohio since my early days here. And Chandini points out, yes, there's a Macedonian Orthodox Church as well. Exactly, yeah. And as I say, you can measure the a sense of the linguistic diversity by paying attention to the number of different religious shrines and temples and churches and such. There are several Korean churches, for instance, in the area. Yeah. Oh, great. Good. I'm glad that this resonates with some of you. Let me go back then to our. And there's also, and speaking of churches, one of my first experiences with another language in Columbus was at a deaf, was taking ASL classes at a deaf church. And actually, Columbus has been a haven for deaf culture, so that there's a thriving American Sign Language community in Columbus. Columbus is, my understanding is that it's the third largest deaf community in the nation. And there has been for a long time, and still continues to be, a very strong sign language interpreting program at Columbus State Community College. And she's no longer there, but one of the women who had been a professor in the sign language program at Columbus State took a course with me in the early 1980s that was the predecessor to the 3901 historical linguistics class that I know that some of you have taken. And Christine Evanson was her name, and Chuck Gramley were among the driving force behind the creation of this very active and prominent sign interpreting program at Columbus State. They've both retired now, I think, but it's in a very small way to have it's exciting for me to have played a role in the linguistic education of one of the founders of that program. Okay, so back to we have here. I know that some of you have experience with sign language, but it's probably worth mentioning, though it came out in some of the reading in the textbook, if you read the Hawk and Joseph textbook, about ASL specifically, and sign languages in general as natural human languages for many years into the 1960s. They were thought to be just a derivative system in some way, and not sort of full-fledged human language, but work by a man named William Stuckey, especially in the 1960s, established that sign languages have all of the complexity and range of expressivity and communicative potential and such that the oral auditory languages have. The difference only is in the modality, that is manual and visual instead of oral and auditory. I think I mentioned when we were talking about Joseph Greenberg and claims about proto-world that remember that what that view fails to recognize is that there are many full-fledged languages that are sign languages that have arisen independently in locales where there's a large percentage of deaf people, and therefore the need for development of a system that is not auditorily based. Okay, I'm going to turn now to diversity in English in Ohio. And here I have, you probably have been wondering, when is he going to get to the T-shirt du jour? Well, here it is. This is a map of English diversity in Ohio. Let me give you a photo of it. Just need to find the right. There we go. This is the photo. It was of my T-shirt. Ohio is interesting from the point of view of English dialectology, in that it shows in that Ohio, it shows three different dialect zones. The northern part of Ohio shows dialectal affiliations with the northeast of the United States. So if you sort of follow up along my sleeve here, that would be take you into New York and New England and such. The largest group of American dialects is so-called Midlands dialect, and that's this middle strip, as it were, that includes Ohio, Columbus, right there in the capital. And then there's a more southerly swath of a dialect in English, that American English, that is represented in Ohio, in Appalachia, and in the southern parts. In this respect, Ohio is one of the few states, I think Indiana might be the only other one, that shows these three distinct zones of American English dialects. And most other states are dominated by one or other, and it's just the Ohio's particular geographic location that and the historical paths by which these dialects have emerged and spread that gives us these three distinct bands corresponding to the three main dialect zones of American English. And there are, let me get rid of this, and I think I can get rid of this now. We can go back to, Ohio. Yeah, here we go. So what I'd like to end or take as our final topic, which will actually take some time, is to do a close-up case study of the Pennsylvania German in Ohio, the Amish and Mennonite communities, and their particular variety of German, the so-called Deutsch. And this is based on work that a student of mine from the turn of the millennium, the late 1990s into the early 2000s, Steve Hartman Kaiser. He's now a professor of linguistics in the English department at Marquette University in Milwaukee. This was work that he did as part of his dissertation, and I'll turn to that now. The Amish have a very visible, I see two of these, okay, a very visible presence, very distinctive dress. These are some young Amish boys, the plain clothes with suspenders, the hats, and so forth. And I show you these just because these are images that some of you may well have seen and experienced yourself, and they add to the not only to the linguistic diversity but also the cultural diversity in our state. There's also just the Amish buggies that are distinctive, and here's another buggy. So horse-drawn carriages. It has to do with the way they their relationship to modern technology, I guess is the way to characterize it. And they have a somewhat they refer to it as plain lifestyle in terms of technology. They don't reject technology altogether, but they reject it as far as their home and in some instances their farming life is concerned. You can even see signs like this informing you on the road that there are buggies to watch out for. How many of you have actually seen any of these buggies, horse-drawn buggies on the roads? I see Rebecca's raised her hand. Chandini, you've seen many. Yeah. Anyone live in the near Holmes County? Just out of curiosity, any of you? But this is part of the Ohio landscape, part of the Ohio culturescape, part of the Ohio linguistscape, if you will. And so it's important to recognize it's part of the overall diversity of Ohio. Let me close these. Yeah, and Amish country is a great place to visit. Yeah, Hannah says and great foods, cheese and pies and so forth, and it's just it's an interesting, very different from Columbus, and it's just like I say, maybe 30 minutes away. It's a very I personally find it very interesting and exciting to be exposed to different cultures. Diversity I consider to be a good thing. I know there's debate about that. To me, there's no debate, but I understand that there are differences of opinion. But to me, it's just interesting to see the ways in which different peoples sort of address the problem of living in the material world, so to speak. Yeah, Sugar Creek, Ohio is a place I've been to as well, and there's a Swiss festival there. Yeah, super cute. Yeah, a good characterization. Great. Okay. Let's move on then to some of the work that Steve Kaiser has done. He was the one who was responsible for this map that I showed you. And we can go back. This is an article that he published in a book that I helped to edit on language diversity in Michigan and Ohio, along with Dennis Preston and his wife, Carol. We had a conference about about linguistic diversity in these two states. He was at Michigan State at the time. I was at Ohio State, and we were friends and got to talking about what such a showcasing the diversity in our respective states, how we might do that. We had a conference, and a book came out of that. I will encourage you, if you are interested in following up on this, I encourage you to let me put this in the chat. And this review is of the book, gives you a sort of quick précis of what all was contained in it. This is to go to everyone. Yeah, there you go. Back to sharing screen. There we go. So Steve published this article in this book, and he, as I say, he did his dissertation on a comparative study of the Pennsylvania German in Ohio, and compared with the parallel Pennsylvania German in an Iowa community. He grew up near that community. He himself was Mennonite, so he had an in, as it were, to both the Iowa community, and through his wife, who was also Mennonite, but from Ohio, the Holmes County community as well. And he did work on the sort of raw linguistic details about the language, but also the social setting, the sociolinguistics of or the sociology of the language use. And this write-up was based on his work. But as he says here, Pennsylvania German is one of the success stories in immigrant language maintenance in North America. The usual pattern has been cultural and linguistic assimilation, the minority language communities giving way to through the sort of omnipresence of English as the dominant language in the linguistic environment of most of America, and certainly in Pennsylvania and Ohio and Iowa. What we find is that these most minority language communities show the erosion of the minority language and the spread and adoption of the dominant language English. But Pennsylvania German has held out very well, and is actually, as he says, one of the success stories of language maintenance for a minority community. Ohio currently has some 50,000 speakers, the largest of any state or province in North America. There are, as I mentioned, Pennsylvania, Iowa, but also in Canada, there are some speakers, some communities of speakers. And that's why he says North America, not just the United States. These are mostly religious groups, so-called plain religious groups, Amish or Old Order Mennonite, and who came from a particular region, the Palatine region of Germany, and have settled here in the U.S. As I say, late 1700s into the early 1800s, with so they were among the early European settlers in Ohio. So mainly then it's as he says, the history of the Mennonites, especially the Amish. There are non-plain Dutch speakers, that is not associated with one of these religious orders, but they didn't really establish communities in which the dialect was maintained. The first Amish arrived in Ohio at the end of the 18th century, Fairfield County. So they moved first to Virginia and Pennsylvania, and then some of them moved further west. And 1801 was the first Mennonite community that's still the establishment of the first Mennonite community that's still in around today. And Holmes County started being populated by Amish in the early 19th century. What they were looking for was most of what their so-called English neighbors were interested in as well: more, better, cheaper land. And they came from mostly agricultural settings or environments in Germany, and transplanted their agricultural ways in these new lands in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and further west even. So there was a period where Dutch was undergoing the obsolescence, the erosion into the middle of the 20th century. So at that point, it was beginning to follow the more typical path that minority languages undergo. The social and political and economic pressures are often very hard to resist, so that these this pattern is repeated again and again and again in various minority languages. And what we referred to with regard to the American Indian languages is the same story, though, with the loss of the language, the attrition of the language, the erosion of the language in the communities, and the onslaught of English, really. Nonetheless, there were some half dozen settlements in the state where the language remained the primary code of daily life. And one of the things that then made an important difference for sort of turning around the obsolescence was a population explosion among the plain group. Large families and retention rates of over 80% among young people during the 20th century, as he says here, have caused the Amish population in North America to double almost every 20 years. So that with greater numbers of speakers and the will to continue using the language in the at least in the home environment, that led to that sort of turned around or reversed the early 20th century trend towards obsolescence of the language. We won't worry about Michigan, just because we're Buckeyes. Current status, this is based on the work that he did in the late 1990s and early 2000s, a field work that he did. He actually lived in the communities for 2 summers and worked there. Currently, Dutch is the first or co-first language, along with English, of some 50,000 Amish living in Ohio, with a good many of them in nearly half in Holmes County, the Holmes County area. What we find is sort of a religiously based set of attitudes towards the use of the language, where we find, especially among the Old Order Amish, New Order Amish, and the Beachy Amish Mennonite groups, fluent bilingualism used amongst intimates. So, if you know if you have another Dutch speaking family next door, you speak to them in Dutch, so that we find that it's a sort of in-group language for these different religious orders. English is used with outsiders, so they're bilingual. They're fully bilingual in English and Dutch, and they divide up their linguistic ecology depending on who they're talking to. As he says here, what we have is really a case of stable bilingualism marked by early acquisition, so children are learning it, and positive attitudes towards both languages, clearly defined functional domains for each of the languages. With passing the language on to children is an important way. This is one of the most unfortunate aspects of the situation with most American Indian languages, is that it's just the elders, the 60 plus or 70 or 80 plus population that has any command of the language at all, and the language, many of the Indian languages are not being passed on to younger speakers, to younger generations. But that is not the case with Dutch. Children acquire Dutch first, though they do, by the time they enter preschool, have some passive competence in English. And the age breakdown in a family matters, because older siblings who would have started out speaking Dutch as their first language in the home, they have more experience with English in the schools, because English is the only medium for education, the only language used for education. So and so the younger siblings are exposed to English through the older siblings, and so the younger siblings often have a sort of less a lesser command, or it takes them longer to reach certain levels of proficiency in Dutch, because their older siblings whom they interact with are exposed to English and are sort of part of the in a sense, they're carriers for English back into the family. Let's see. So isolation there, and so most of the Amish were and Mennonites were agricultural in terms of their economic, the way they made their livings. They were farmers, but but many of them have been Holmes County, it says here, the number of adult males employed as farmers has dropped dramatically from 71% to 31% in just 30 years time. This has led to what is referred to as the lunch pail threat, because there's increased exposure to so-called English ways as they work away from home. One of the things that has helped turn around this lunch pail threat, and Steve Kaiser has written, Hartman Kaiser has written about this in other work, is the fact that a number of Amish small businesses have emerged in the last 20 years or so, where there are what he refers to as Amish micro entrepreneurs with bike shops, catering businesses, sewing shops, and woodworking shops. He himself worked 2 summers in a woodworking shop, and what this means is that the domains in which Dutch is used have expanded. Beyond the family, beyond the home setting and the farm setting. You now find Dutch used in these small businesses where that are run by Dutch, and the workers are Dutch speakers as well. So that the domain of usage has expanded, and that has led to a sort of it's countered this lunch pail threat, and has led to an increased usage of the language in a broader ecological, in a broader set of ecological niches, we might say. With regard to language maintenance, he says here, it's not really a conscious decision. It just falls out from the daily practices of being old order Amish. They don't have particular statements about pride in their language. It's just, this is the way they are. This is our language. We use it. What else would we speak, basically? So it's a very practical sort of orientation. But some of the other groups, the New Order Amish and the Beachy Amish, there the social and religious identity is tied into the language in ways that it isn't for the old order Amish. I think he highlighted a couple of other things. He was looking not just at the sort of the social dimensions to the use of the language, the sociology of the language, so to speak, but also some of the nitty-gritty details, so that the languages are not, or so that there is, just as Labov would lead us to expect, there's variation in Dutch. It's not a monolithic linguistic system. And these are some of the features that he focused on. In matters of pronunciation having to do with diphthongs versus monophthongs, the realization of the R like sound, the realization of the L's, and various grammatical factors, as well as lexical issues. And yeah, I will put this, I may have already put it on reserve or in Carmen for you, but I would, if you're interested and want to read more about it, this was intended for a generalist audience, but you all have more than enough linguistics under your belt to be able to handle even the technical stuff. And then finally, yeah, there's this map that he ends with. So I think that's all that I had in mind to say about the about his study of Deutsch and about the linguistic diversity in Ohio more generally. I don't think I ever showed you this particular T-shirt. I can't remember if I did or I didn't, but this is, yeah, I think I probably did, but it's a suitable one to end the day with. This is the multilingual Go Bucks that the Center for the foreign, what was then called the Foreign Language Center, and it's now the Center for Culture, Language, and Literature, something like that. I can't remember its exact title, but this was Go Bucks in many different languages, including Spanish, including sign language, ASL, including Albanian. Oh no, here's the Albanian. Hi, Buckeyes. And Latin for the fun of it, and a few other languages as well. So this gives you just a visual sampling of linguistic diversity as represented here at the Ohio State University. So I'll stop sharing. Does anyone have any questions? We have a couple minutes. Any of you have any experiences yourselves with language diversity in Ohio? How about different varieties of English even? Cleveland versus Cincinnati. In the days when you could have roommates in the dormitories and so forth, you had interactions with students, friends, and acquaintances and so forth from all over the state, I would imagine. Did anyone notice linguistic differences? One of the faculty members in the linguistics department, Catherine Campbell-Kibler, did a study of exactly the kinds of dialect interactions that students reported on in the dormitories, and she put it together into a paper that was entitled "When Dialects Go to College," which I thought was a great title. And she was looking at exactly this phenomenon of, in a state like Ohio, where there are different varieties of English, not strikingly different, but there are some noticeable differences. What do you find going on in a dormitory cluster of 4 or 8 students living together, representing different dialects? There's a very powerful mechanism of adaptation that's referred to in the literature as accommodation, where we tend to accommodate our aspects of our speech, aspects of our gestures, and even something as simple as to what other people are doing. Even something as simple as the speed that you walk at. People tend to walk at more or less the same pace in order to stay together. And there's some degree of accommodation necessary there. And we see this realized in the accommodation of with regard to linguistic differences among speakers of different dialects. So I think I'll end on that note. I will give you one last verbal plea. I may send you a message as well, but I'll give you one last verbal plea to fill out your SEIs. And most importantly, do not fail to show up for the final exercise, which is Thursday, the 29th of April. So a week from tomorrow at 12 noon. And it will be fun. And you can get to it through the exact same link that you saw, I hope you saw my message, the exact same link that got you to class today. I'm just putting this in the chat via same Zoom link as for regular class sessions. So please take note of that. Set your clocks. Everyone should be awake by noon, but make sure you're up and ready to go. It'll be a fun experience. No preparation needed. Just show up and enjoy. So any last minute questions about anything? Okay. Thank you all very much. It's been a good semester from my point of view. I've enjoyed it, even with all of the angst and such that associated with the pandemic. I think collectively we've made the most of a bad situation. So I'll see you all then a week from tomorrow. Don't fail to be there, please. Okay. All right. So long, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks for a good semester.
Good. Thank you. I enjoyed every bit of it.
Me too. Bye.
Good. Bye-bye.